Hey everyone, today we're diving into a really powerful idea. What if global inequality isn't just random? What if it's actually built into the system, almost like an architecture?
I mean, it's a question we've all wondered about, right? Why are some countries so incredibly wealthy while others struggle so much? We usually hear about things like their government, or their culture, or maybe the natural resources they have. But what if the real answer isn't inside those countries at all? What if it's about how the entire world is connected?
And that leads to this provocative thought. What if it's not an accident? What if it's a system? The idea that the wealth of some nations is directly, and I mean directly, linked to the poverty of others, all playing a part in one single global economic machine.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we have to kind of shift our perspective. Let's stop seeing the world as a bunch of separate countries for a minute, and instead see it as one big interconnected economy.
So think about the global economy not as a level playing field, but more like a pyramid. And here's the key. A country's economic fate isn't just about its own internal policies. Nope. It's hugely influenced by where it sits in that global pyramid.
So if it's a pyramid, how do you actually map it? Well, back in the 1970s, a sociologist named Immanuel Wallerstein developed a really powerful framework to do exactly that. It's called World Systems Theory, and it gives us a kind of blueprint of this global power structure. Wallerstein basically divided the world into three tiers. At the very top, you've got the core nations. We're talking about places like the US, Western Europe, Japan. They're the wealthy, high-tech countries that pretty much control global trade. Then, way down at the bottom, you have the periphery nations. These countries provide the raw materials and the cheap labor that fuel the core. And stuck in the middle, that's the semi-periphery. Countries like Brazil or India, which have a bit of both and act as a kind of buffer zone.
Now, this relationship is a system of totally unequal exchange. Here's how it works. Core nations import cheap raw materials from the periphery. They use their advanced technology and factories to turn those materials into high-value goods, and then they sell them back at a huge profit. It's this constant flow that keeps the core wealthy and the periphery dependent.
So what's the engine driving this whole system? Well, according to the theory, it's not about anyone being evil. It's simply the cold, hard logic of capitalism. The drive for profit is relentless, and it naturally concentrates wealth and technology in the core, creating these deep, lasting inequalities across the globe. Okay, so if world systems theory is the map of how things are right now, how did we even get here? For that, we need to go back in time a little, to its predecessor, which is called dependency theory. Think of it as the historical backstory. This idea popped up in the 1960s, and it argued that the underdevelopment of poor nations wasn't some natural state or a sign that they were just failing to catch up. No, it was an active process. The wealth of the core was literally created by taking resources from the periphery, a pattern that was established a long, long time ago. You can trace the roots of this whole system back centuries. The basic structure was laid down during the colonial era as European powers extracted massive amounts of wealth from Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Then, in the 1960s, dependency theory came along to explain why these patterns were still happening even after independence. And just a decade later, world systems theory expanded that idea into a model for the entire modern global economy. Of course, like any really big idea, these theories have faced a ton of criticism. They give us a powerful lens to look through, for sure, but they don't necessarily capture the whole picture. So let's take a look at some of the main counterarguments. Critics often argue that these theories are just too deterministic. They make it seem like a country's fate is completely sealed by its place in the world. They also tend to downplay the importance of what's going on inside a country, like good governance versus corruption. And then there's the big one. How do you explain the Asian tigers? Countries like South Korea or Taiwan that went from the periphery to being highly developed economies. The theories, they have a really hard time explaining that kind of mobility. So after all that, looking at the theories and the criticisms, what's the big takeaway? What's the main thing we should remember from all this? It's this. Whether you fully buy into these theories or not, they force us to recognize one crucial thing. No country develops in a vacuum. A nation's place in the global web of trade, finance, and power plays a massive role in its destiny. It's a powerful reminder that the world isn't flat. It's a deeply structured and hierarchical system.
And that leaves us with a final, really big question to think about. In a world that is more interconnected than ever before, is it actually possible for nations to break free from these historical patterns and forge their own path? Or is the architecture of the system just too powerful to overcome? That's something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.